A very, very warm welcome on behalf of our mini reporters. Thank you so much, Anne, for agreeing to answer their questions in this mini reporters press conference. For the past 2 weeks, our Media Cubs mini reporters have been running their own campaign called Raise Your Hand in response to feeling a bit left out from the COVID-19 conversations and feeling like there were a lot of conversations that were taking place that weren't including them when, as you can tell, they've got plenty of views and plenty of questions that they would really love somebody to answer.
Yeah.
And you are the first representative from the government who has stopped and listened. So we're really, really grateful for that.
Although I'm not government, remember, I'm completely independent of government, so... Oh,
okay, well, that's good.
So you're yet to get someone from government to respond to you?
We're yet then to get somebody specifically from 10 Downing Street, shall we say. But this is the first time...
I've 10 Downing Street too and haven't had a reply yet.
Oh, have you? We're quite curious as to why the Prime Minister doesn't want to perhaps get into a Q&A with kids. But we'll see, maybe things will change. But it is the first time that their questions are getting addressed on a national level. So we're really grateful for that. Thank you, Anne. I'd like me to introduce you to my colleague Kirsty, who's hiding at the moment, but here we go.
Hi, Kirsty.
Kirsty's going to be supporting our 3 mini reporters. We've got Frankie.
Hi.
We've got Tom.
Hi.
And we've got Maya.
Hi, Maya.
And all 3 have their own questions as well as questions that they've collected throughout the campaign to ask you. So without further ado, you've heard more than enough from me. I'm going to leave you to it.
Great. Thank you.
I just want to say quickly thank you for joining our newsroom, and we've got some burning questions for you. The all-season young mini reporters and this, we've had a press conference already with this school, so they put all the questions together like Grace said with some of their friends, some of their own questions. So I'll hand straight over to them, and first question is going to come from Maya.
What ran through your thoughts when you were first notified about coronavirus?
So I think, like everyone, it was a big shock. I was actually in Norway and Sweden when they started to lock down the week before, when it became obvious what was happening, and came home quickly. So it was a huge shock. I saw children going home from school with big kind of piles of books and everything. It felt as though, suddenly the enormity of what was happening hit home to everyone, and lockdown was something that seemed to happen very quickly. So I was as shocked as anyone else. From the point of view of my office, it's a relatively small office. There's about 30 of us. We, like virtually everyone in offices, if we could, started to work from home, and really started to look at what the impact on children was for this lockdown. And that's what we've been doing ever since, especially looking at those kids that possibly are having a hard time, that maybe not have an outdoor space, maybe are overcrowded housing and the like, but really been highlighting that throughout the time.
Thank you. We'll go to Tom next.
We have asked the Prime Minister our questions. Said no so far. Why do you think he said no?
So you've asked the PM to answer questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know is the answer. And clearly there's a pandemic going on. So it is a busy time. But all I would say is that carry on asking, because one of the things that I've been impressed by in other countries is really early on, there was a press briefing or a number of press briefings, the kind of things that we had at 5 o'clock, which were just for children. And the PM of those countries, Denmark did it, Norway did it, New Zealand did it, actually spent one of those, dedicated one of those to children, talking to children about this, reassuring them, answering questions. And that's something that I have been asking the PM to do, and still would like him to do. So I would say, yes, clearly it's a busy time, but carry on, because it would be a very good thing to do.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, it's great to hear about the other countries, so we'll hopefully follow suit. And next up, Frankie.
Why are some schools doing Zoom calls and some aren't?
So there is a difference in how some schools are keeping in touch with pupils. Some will have more tech set up. Secondary schools probably are a little bit easier to run that. But there is a big difference across different kids' experiences. There's also a lot of children that don't have access to laptops, don't have access to broadband, so they just can't get online at all. But something that I am really keen to happen, you know, if everyone's looking at what might happen if there's another lockdown or a localized lockdown, I'd like to be much clearer about what children can expect in terms of the kind of arrangement with the school, because I think it would be helpful if everyone had a similar level of engagement.
And we'll go back to Maya for the next question.
Now that lockdown is coming to an end, do you believe our route was the most effective way to handle the COVID-19 outbreak?
Well, I think that, again, this was something that happened fast, and it was something that decisions had to be made quickly, and some things in hindsight could be done differently. And that's something, like I was saying there, about schools could have much clearer, more consistent set of expectations next time. So there's lots of things in hindsight that might be done differently. Some countries have done it just like us, some have done it slightly different. A lot of schools have gone back earlier in other countries, and I was really keen for schools to open up much earlier, and I would have liked all children to be going to school during this month and indeed last month, and that's something which I think kids have missed out on in this country. But I think, you know, now it has to focus on, if there are other small localized lockdowns in the future, actually what have we learned that we do differently? And that's something which I think really your voice would be incredibly important with.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. Tom, can you got your next question?
Why can football return but we can't watch the Olympics?
Do you like football?
Yeah.
So it's quite quiet, isn't it? I'm not a football fan, so you're not talking to the right person here. But what you've got with football, obviously, you've got a limited number of people on the pitch, and you've got no spectators. So it's very different. When you've got the Olympics, you know, it's a huge military exercise with the Olympics, with all countries around the world. They plan for months. There's huge numbers of people. There's huge amounts of organisation and spectators. So I think some of this is about the scale of the event. But as someone who likes football, I guess you're quite pleased it started. Have you been watching it?
Yeah.
Are we going back to Frankie?
Why can we be at school and see our friends when we can't see them outside of school?
Well, I think you can probably see your friends outside of school within certain restrictions now, but it's certainly within school. I've kind of argued the case that there should be different kinds of arrangements, because you've got, as long as it's safe, as long as it's ordered in a way where you can keep regular groups of children together, and they're small groups and there could be good hygiene around it, then what we know is that, you know, children, especially very young children, are much less likely to catch the virus, but also it seems less likely to transmit it. So there's something about the school being a very structured environment, about they're able to be, you know, very limited movement, and to be able to trace who else is in that school. So it's quite an ordered environment. I mean, I've been arguing strongly that actually we should open parks back up and open spaces for children and families to be able to go. I mean, there's been some lovely weather over recent months, and for those that haven't got access to space, it's been really difficult, I think. In Scotland, they've just introduced it that actually for children under 12, there's no need for social distancing at all in a social kind of setting, and that's something that I'd like to see in this country too.
Thank you. Can we go back to you, Mike, for your third question?
Should teachers receive a raise for all their efforts?
Do you think they should?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I think what's one thing that's really, really been very clear, and it's been a really good thing during this emergency, is all those people on the front line, you know, the nurses, the people in hospitals, the people who are been working throughout in shops, the people who've been delivering our mail, and indeed teachers who've done so much to keep in touch with children, especially vulnerable children, are the most important people that we have in the country. And I hope that that's changed minds. Sometimes it's easy to overlook those people that are there to help and support us. But actually, I think that that's something which hopefully going forward, people will think differently about. And with that, you know, just as with people who are working in care homes and the rest, it means sometimes that we look again at how much we pay them and thank them and what status we give them. And so I think that's only a good thing that can come.
Yeah, we agree. Back to you, Tom, for your third question.
Will I always have to wear a face mask?
Well, so I don't think we know what always is anymore at the moment, and that sounds a bit of a scary thing, but I think one thing about this is we don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know you know, how things are going to go in the future, but certainly for now, in certain situations, of course, we've been told we need to wear face masks in shops, in public transport and the like. Not in school, which, you know, I think is a good thing, but certainly for now. And, you know, that's important not only so, you know, you as an individual don't catch it, but also so you don't pass that on. I think that's all part of being able to get a slight normality back in our life, that we're able to think we can do this, but also reduce the risks as well. So for now, I think yes, but for the future, hopefully not. Have you worn face masks, all of you?
Yeah, I am.
Do you find them difficult?
They get itchy.
They go quite hot, don't they?
Yeah.
Have you had one of the visor things that you've worn?
No, not yet.
Okay. Sometimes people think they feel a bit better because they're not as restrictive. But I mean, the good thing is for children under 11, I think the guidance is that they shouldn't have to wear masks.
I've seen some very cool masks about as well. So children's
there are more designs coming, aren't they now? In fact, I heard you could get football team branded ones.
There you go, Tom.
Which Tom might like.
Thank you. Back to you for the question.
When will schools go back to the ways they were before COVID-19?
Yeah, well, I hope from September, actually. Obviously, it won't be completely the same as it was, but I hope from September there'll be an awful lot of normality in schools. From September, hopefully, all children will be in schools of all ages. And that will mean more children, you know, in the building. It will mean more normality about lessons and the like. It will be different because there will be more safety. There will be more of an emphasis on hygiene. You know, it might mean that you can't travel around the school as much. It might mean that the desks are laid out differently. And also that teachers may be a little bit more distance physically from you. But I hope it will be a big change, because what I've wanted to see is for children to get the kind of normality back in their life. I mean, it's been difficult for everyone, but I think for children, they've told me that, you know, it's really uncertain what the future would be, and the normality of school, the structure of school, to have your friends around you and to have teachers there, I think will make hopefully a huge difference. So I hope that's something you're looking forward to in September.
Yeah, thank you. These guys are all moving on to secondary school in September, so they've got some big changes ahead. So it's
yeah.
Back to you, Mike, for your fourth question.
If schools can safely be open to all children in September, then should they have been closed in the first place? What has changed?
Well, in some countries, actually, schools weren't closed. In Sweden, in Iceland, Estonia, I think, they actually kept schools open the whole time. But most countries did close schools, and I think on balance that was right, because we didn't know much about the disease. We didn't know how quickly it was going to hit or how long it was going to be. And it's not just children being in schools, you know, it's teachers being in schools, but it's also parents and families taking children to school and dropping them off, and traffic around. And if you remember in those first few weeks of lockdown, I don't know about you, but I took some photographs of, you know, the streets and roads around where I live, and it was so quiet. You know, there were so few people walking around apart from kind of a bit of exercise. And so it felt the right thing to do then. What I think we know now is how much more about how to put the kind of safety mechanisms in place. The transmission rate has dropped, the infection rate has dropped a lot. So it's different now. It's starting from a different starting point. But I would have liked schools to have opened earlier. So I wish that a lot of you hadn't have had so many months out of school. How many of you have been back in school? If you're in year 6 now, have you been back for the last few weeks?
Yeah, pretty much since February.
You've been back for a few weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you see a lot of children won't be in those years, and you know, they will be possibly 6 months out of school, which is a long, long time.
Yeah, I think we'll all agree when we really reports that we enjoyed being back at school.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely have. Next question.
When can we have big gatherings?
Sorry, say that again.
When can we have big gatherings?
Oh, big gatherings. Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is that I don't know. And I think that, you know, we all miss them, because I've just had a big birthday, but we've had lockdown birthdays, we've had people who have had weddings planned, have had to postpone them, you know, so it's all of the things that are really nice to have gatherings and to have family and friends and celebrations, and that's just not possible at the moment. So I don't know. I think it's relaxing at the moment in terms of the small groups that can now get together, but I think we might have to wait a while till we get the big gatherings that we used to kind of take for granted. Do you miss them?
Yeah, a lot.
What kind of things do you miss?
I miss going to like restaurants and places like that.
So restaurants, you know, a lot of restaurants are now opening up, and I went for the first time yesterday. I noticed it was a bit strange because half of the tables are gone. So, you know, you've got lots of space in them, lots of emphasis on tables being cleaned and the like. But I think that, you know, that will start to become more possible, if you like. But the really big gatherings, big family gatherings, might have to wait a little bit.
I think the other one that they probably feel like they're missing out on is the leavers party. Because
oh yeah, of course. So of course you're year 6 just leaving. So, well, I remember when my son left primary school, and indeed when he left secondary school, and it's such a big moment, isn't it, there? And it's so good to have that party and that celebration. So did you do something online?
I think we're having a barbecue tomorrow, socially distanced.
Because I know some schools did sort of online leaving parties where everyone could come on and say goodbye to each other. So yeah, it's difficult that. I mean, maybe you could do in the future when things get back to normal, maybe you could do a 1 year on gathering or something.
That's a nice idea. Yeah, I've done a little video haven't you, with your music teacher, which will be a nice thing for them to be able to keep. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, happy birthday, by the way.
Oh, thank you. It had a little gathering, a tiny one.
You want to ask you a question, Frankie?
What will happen in secondary school? How will I know that I'm safe?
Well, it's really important that, have you had a chance to go to your secondary school and have a look yet before the end of term?
Yeah, I went with my form and we had social distance.
And were they reassuring? Did they tell you how things were going to work?
Yes, they told us how things were going to work and that we definitely need to wash our hands very regularly.
So I think, you know, schools will be doing everything they possibly can to make sure that it's a welcoming place when you come in September, but also that it's absolutely safe as possible. There will be some rules. There'll be, I imagine, you know, you won't be going between different rooms quite as much. There'll be lots of one-way kind of things. But I think also you should, you know that you aren't one of the high-risk groups. You know, very few children have caught this. We did some research with nurseries over the lockdown period, and they've been running, you know, at half capacity, 2/3 capacity. Lots of children have been coming in and very few infections at all. So, you know, and also, as I say, in other countries, lots of children have been in schools. So I think you should have some reassurance that it's very rare for children to be affected and to catch it, but also that schools will have been doing everything they possibly can to make you feel okay and safe when you're there. It'd be great, obviously, if you can kind of stick to the rules when you're there. And obviously the whole thing about hygiene and washing your hands, really, really important. But I think it'll start to feel normal after the first couple of days. I hope so anyway.
Thank you. And Maya, we're back to you for your next question.
What will happen to the economy?
Yeah, so it's been not only a kind of health shock, of course, over the last few weeks, but it has meant a lot for a lot of people's jobs and businesses. So there has been, you know, I do think it's a very good thing that government's put some really big schemes in place. There's been what they call a furlough scheme for workers who maybe their jobs are at risk. A lot of people who worked in kind of restaurants and hospitality. So the government paid for those salaries. There's also been loans to businesses, because lots of businesses, they're kind of, you know, their normal day-to-day work kind of went overnight. But I think undoubtedly it will mean that some people have lost their job and the economy will be going much slower because people aren't going out and people aren't spending as much money. I know there'll be a lot of people who are working hard to look at how that can be as little as possible and how the economy can be supported. And I guess my message to you guys would be that, you know, first of all, you know, there are other people who actually need to worry about the economy. And it's great you're aware of it. I wouldn't want you to spend time worrying about it. But also the best way that you can, you know, be okay in any future in the economy is if you're kind of, you know, if you're positive, if you've got as much out of school as possible, you know, when you've got good skills that you can use. And we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but certainly the economy is going to have a bit of a hit. But, you know, you've got a lot of more years at school ahead of you, so make the most of that time and hopefully you should be okay.
Definitely, and yeah, I totally agree, not for you to worry. Tom, do you want to ask your next question?
How will younger children understand social distancing?
Yeah, so have any of you got younger siblings?
Yeah.
Do they understand it?
Not really.
So I think the thing for, you know, really young kids is they don't. And so I think there's two things. First of all, it's very difficult to get very young children social distance because they won't understand it and they may get very distressed by it. But the second part of it is that very young children are at the least risk. I talked before about the nurseries that have been operating and doing so really successfully. And also all the evidence shows less likely to pass it on. So for younger children, I think that I agree with not social distancing between, you know, the small groups, the so-called kind of bubbles. But also, as I say as well, in Scotland, they have removed social distancing for under 12s, and I think that's sensible because there's less risk of any health impact, but also for young kids, having that normality of being able to mix without social distancing is something that I think we should recognise as a very good thing.
Thank you. And I think we've got our final question from Frankie.
How will we be able to socially distance on aeroplanes?
So on aeroplanes, I've not been in an aeroplane during this time, but really every airline will have its own kind of rules and requirements. And I expect that there'll be a lot less people on the plane. You might be asked to wear face masks, you will be asked to wear face masks, I'm sure. And people may be seated in kind of family groups or alternate seats, but each aircraft will have its own rules, and you'll just need to follow those. And any of you going on a plane over the summer? Where are you going?
Going to Spain.
Okay, so there will be rules that you'll need to follow, but hopefully with that, then you'll be fine.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you so much for answering their questions. Some tough questions for you there, and you have handled
a broad range of questions there, which is great. No, do, and it's a great thing you're doing this. It's really, really good, and I just encourage you to get to speak to as many people as you can with this, because as with all of these things, you know, often children's points of view get overlooked. And so it's great that you're getting people on the screen and asking them, and carry on, you know, asking politicians to talk as well. That's a very good thing.
Yeah, thank you. We'll definitely be encouraging them to do that. They've done so well so far, and all credit goes to them for the fantastic questions that they have had.
Great.
So thank you very much for joining.
And good luck, everyone. Good luck with schools in September. Have a great summer holidays before that. And keep us posted. We'd love to hear more.
Can I just ask you to just stay on screen for 1 minute, and I'll get them to pose for a picture? Is that okay? With their we got big smiles from everybody. Lovely. Lovely. Thank you so much, Anne. I think Grace is going to just come back to wind us up.
Okay.
I just wanted to say quickly, you might have been wondering who I am. I am one of the 30 people working with Anne. I've just listened in and taken a few notes of what you've been asking, and yeah, thank you. It was really, really great to hear all your questions.
Oh, thank you so much for listening.
And thanks for help organising, Carolina. It's really good.
Yeah, thank you to Carolina, and thank you, Anne, for agreeing after we just sent you a message on Twitter in the hope someone would listen, and you did, and we're really, really grateful on behalf of the mini reporters. It just shows that our mini reporters and young people have so many questions and views that are worth answering. I learned so much from that, so I'm sure that the mini reporters did as well. So thank you for your honesty and your non-patronising answers. It's really, really useful. I've got just a question before you go. From your answers, it seems like you have been incredibly busy during this time. So as Children's Commissioner, what has been your role during the pandemic, and how do you see that changing as things develop?
So it hasn't changed, the role's the same, but of course the context has been different. So what we always do, well, there's a few things that have changed. So there's two things that I can do, the powers I have. One is that I can collect data to kind of shine a light on what's going on. And the other is I've got what they call a power of entry. I can go anywhere where children are living away from home to talk to them. Now, both of those things I stopped doing during lockdown, partly because, you know, I couldn't go visit. No one would want me to go into the hospitals, prisons weren't accepting visitors, so I couldn't go. And the other is that I didn't ask for any new data from councils and from NHS and people like that during the lockdown because they were so busy. I didn't want to burden them. But I mean, what essentially the job's about is is looking out for children at points, and also really voicing what their experiences are and concerns. So during the pandemic, what we were doing was really highlighting where children were vulnerable, highlighting where children needed a different response, highlighting where children needed to be considered more. And that might be about things like, you know, housing. It might be things about going back to school, all of those things. And we've been raising those, and raising them, I think, quite publicly, so that people were aware of them. And also within all of that, writing to politicians. For instance, recently, not that they're politicians, but we've been writing to the scientists, the government scientific advisors, asking whether they have looked at children as a specific group, because often people look at, you know, scientists will look at the general population as a whole, but children have a very different response to this. So asking them if they've looked at children specifically, whether they will adapt any of their guidance, such as the under 12 social distancing as a result. So it's been, on one hand, business as normal, but on the other, in a very different context.
Yeah, and I imagine a bit like the campaign, Raise Your Hand, just showing how important your role is and how children's rights need to be championed and protected.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for instance, this week we were doing, I presented to a parliamentary House of Parliament committee of MPs on children that were in prison, and they've been restricted to their rooms for most of the hours of the day during this period. So really highlighting that, talking about some of the worrying things about that. But also, you know, as part of it, trying to encourage all of us to think about kids. You know, I think one thing is that people have realized that, you know, we have to reassure kids during this time. There's been rainbows out there, and people have been, you know, understood that actually this is difficult for everyone, but it's definitely difficult for kids who don't have the normality of their friends and will be missing all of that.
Absolutely. It was really interesting to hear how other countries have responded, and perhaps publicly their governments have perhaps done more to reassure kids. So thank you for representing them and championing them, and keep banging the drum, and I'm sure our mini reporters will do the same. So thank you so much.
Thank you all then.
We'll share the video with you.
Yeah, that'd be lovely.
Great.
So bye Frankie, bye Tom, bye Maya.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.